So in Night City there is a total of 11 major gangs, and I was always curious about when they started and who started them. So yeah, I made a video. So starting off with the ugliest of the gangs, there's about 1,300 of them in the game. And you can tell by their appearance they don't really care about how they look. These guys are basically cyber psychos. They formed sometime during 2013. You see, they had this crazy fascination with cyberware to the point where they didn't really care about cyberpsychosis or even being human anymore. I guess the equivalent to today's times would be like those celebrities that do that weird shit to their face. You know, when they think they look younger, but they end up looking like handsome Squidward. But anyway, in 2013, there was this gang called the Metal Warriors, or also the Metal Souls. Sounds like a child named it, but anyways. Now, this gang basically targeted anyone who was weaker than them, be it gangs or people, and they were kind of ruthless. They had their own rules. Now, it's not really sure what the rules are, but amongst the group there was this guy named Hammer. Now, Hammer broke the rules and was thrown out of the gang. So, like I said, it's not really clear what the rules are, but there must have been some messed up shit. And for him to be thrown out of this gang, he must have done some really messed up shit. So, after some time, Emma formed Maelstrom with some members from another small gang called the Red Chrome Legion. Seriously, who's naming these gangs? But this one makes a bit more sense because they were described as edgy Nazi teenagers. So yeah, anyway. In the late 2010s, the group was more or less established, and the gang took a place called Barley's in Old Downtown as their hideout. By the 2020s, Maelstrom did small crimes, but their obsession for cyberware drove them to raid a place called Guevara. Anyway, this Mexican restaurant. Now, this place was used to smuggle weapons. Now, during the Fourth Corporate War of Night City, and to give a quick description of what that is, it was essentially a global war that was between the mega corporations like Arasaka and Murtec, basically fighting to see who would run the world, but then cities got caught in a crossfire like Night City. During this time there was also the bombing of Arasaka, you know that thing that Johnny's always going on about? Yeah, that. After the bombing there was this weird EMP thingy that went off and killed most heavily cyber-wearing members of Maelstrom, including Hammer. Well, from then to about 2070 they had a number of successful raids, which made them a very violent and intimidating gang. And by 2077, no one was safe from them. And if you wanted to join them for some weird reason, you had to be cyberized by them. The Valentinos is probably my favorite from the Snake gangs. And they're obviously much better looking than the Maelstrom guys. I mean, to be honest, I think anyone's better looking than them. I think even a rat is better looking than them. One thing I really like about the Valentinos is their style. It's basically unmatched. They have a lot of bling to show off, and I think it looks kinda cool. The gang is about 6,000 of them, which makes them one of the larger gangs in all of Night City. If you're playing a street kid, this is where V is raised. So, like I said, they are a group that definitely likes to show off their bling. You can tell by their tattoos, their murals, and the crosses that they wear that they're very religious too. During the late 2030s, there was this cartel called the El Norte Cartel. I think it's how you said it. That's the guy on YouTube said it.
Actually said as Norte. Norte.
This cartel did like the normal cartel things, you know, dealing in drugs, extortion, all that jazz. Around the mid 2040s, though, El Norte put a lot of trust and investment into a woman named Teresa Valentino. She was running for the top administrative seat of Santo Domingo, which is basically like the mayor but district level. And she was set up against the Aldecaldos official leader. This dude's name was Genesis Dorcal. Yeah, I don't know what kind of name this is. Also, it sounds like a Duracell battery or something. Long story short, though, Teresa won the election. Now you think the cartel was happy with that, but they weren't. It actually turned out being pretty bad for them. What essentially happened was their members of the cartel became more loyal to Teresa Valentino, to the point where they actually started to neglect the cartel boss's wishes. Teresa in fact became so popular that the residents started to call the cartel members the Valentino's Fists, which obviously annoyed the cartel, but they couldn't do anything about it. And I guess over time they dropped the Fists and just remained as the Valentinos, which formed what it is known as in the events of the game. Essentially, she was kind of the GOAT. She kind of overthrew the cartel and took its members. After she won the election, the cartel also gave her 2 bodyguards, which I won't attempt to say their name, but yeah, they are. They were some of the most feared mercenaries at the time. So she was kind of unstoppable, I guess. Anyway, though, skipping ahead to more closer times to the game, there was this place called Moto Cielo, which this place took me a long time to find, by the way, and I think this is it. But this is where many of the Valentinos died. due to some sort of fight, but it's not really clear what the fight was. It's just that a lot of them died. Yeah. Sebastian Ibarra, who was Valentino priest, was in Motocielo during this time and survived this bloodbath. For some reason, this dude saw this as a calling from God to become a fixer. So yeah, I don't know if that was God, but anyway. By the 2070s, they were seen as one of the oldest and respected gangs in Night City, and from around 74 to all the events of the game, them and another gang called 6th Street Gang had a lot of fights. Speaking of these guys, as the events of the gang, there were about 2,300 members, and these guys were kind of different. They actually started out as good guys. You see, they were veterans of the Fourth Corporate War, as you mentioned earlier, and they were fed up with the NCPD being so incompetent and wanted change. Now, remember, these guys were vets, so they were pretty good with guns. And also, they were kind of like mercenaries, but they were generally tolerated by the corpos and the police as long as they stayed in their turf. Now, the official 6th Street Gang was formed between 2025 to 2030 by a guy named Solomon Wright, also known as X.
X gon' give it to you.
Sorry, I had to do that. But anyway, Solomon Wright, or X, was a former US military intelligence officer, and he formed the Six to protect the citizens of Night City after the events of the Fourth Corporate War, the bombing and all that. Now X kind of believed that the Six was more of an organization, but everyone else kind of just saw them as a gang. They may have been the most organized gang out of everyone, because X kind of made sure that his members had monthly checkups for the chrome they used. If they had too much, they would be released from the service. This is probably to prevent cyberpsychosis. But anyways, by the 2040s, they were deputized by a private law enforcement contractor, and they protected the North Haywood streets. Now, during the 2040s, they still kept up with some form of noble law enforcement by fighting gangs and protecting the people. That's where they just started to be another gang. You see, that they had high ambition, but their funds were low. So they started extorting and selling the confiscated goods that they got from gangs. Their ambition drove them to want more and more, which led them for going to have Santo Domingo, where you can see this is obviously where shit happened between them and the Valentinos. Now from the 2050s to the 2070s, they basically lost their ideals and they became another gang. I think also it's because a lot of them weren't really veterans, and during the events of the game they were just, you can see that they're kind of young, so these are just members now. During the 2070s, the Six control most of Santo Domingo, and their forces had grown from retired military officers that couldn't find work elsewhere. Also, some people that just wanted to be in a gang. And in 2071, the Valentinos and the Six had a tough, with the latest conflict being in Westbrook. So from 2074 to 76, tension rise between the two over control over the Vista del Rey region of Santo Domingo. But by 2077, nothing really changed between them. They still had conflicts, but the Six were cooperating with a company called Kendachi to make weapons. So yeah, these guys could potentially be maybe one of the more dangerous groups out of this list simply because of their marksman skills. This gang was always a bit of a mystery because not much is even known of them. Even their name is not actually Voodoo Boys, but no one really knows what their real name is. So unlike the other gangs, we don't actually know how much members they are, but what we do know is that they are net runners who are obsessed with finding out secrets about the net. What is known though is they originate from Haiti. You see, in the universe of Cyberpunk, climate change actually wiped Haiti off the face of the earth, and many refugees fled to Night City during 2062. Now, they settled in Pacifica as construction workers to rebuild it into a resort city, which obviously failed by how it looks in the game for a number of reasons. The Voodoo Boys formed to basically be like these guardians of the Asian refugees in Pacifica, and also became obsessed with making contact with rogue AI in the Black Wall. You know that place where Johnny's hot girlfriend is, but yeah, that place. By 2077, they were basically edge runners, breaking rules, creating viruses on your computer. Okay, I don't know about that last part, but anyways, they were exclusively Asian. Also, like like our mafia was exclusively Italian. Yeah, like that. And the gang was led by Bridget, and her second in command was Placide. Now, depending on your choices in the game, you can either kill all of them or simply walk away. Pretty sure you don't kill all of them, but most of them. And they also had a rivalry with the animals. This is probably the most aggressive gang. out of everyone. They had about 2,500 to 3,000 members, but I guess also it kind of counts as anyone who is like a bodybuilder counts as an animal. So they formed around the late 2070s, so you can see they're kind of young in terms of a gang. Now, these guys were basically cyber junkies, but only for physical attributes. All of their cyberware was for their own physical enhancement. They use stuff such as ultra testosterone and animal supplements. Essentially, these guys wanted to have peak human strength. I guess in today's times it would be the equivalent of those jump bros you see on TikTok. And I see when it comes to animals, they don't have a specific turf. You can find them a lot in the Pacifica region, but they don't really have a place where they are. You can kind of find them all over Night City. They typically consist of small groups with one alpha like wolves, and they have jobs like bouncers or bodyguards. A lot of them also did this extreme plastic surgery to look like animals. So out of the other gangs, these guys had like no order or even one specific founder or boss. They were kind of just like roided up people who wanted to be more roided up. I guess the closest thing they could have to a boss was like the alphas, which is like Sasquatch. Do you guys remember Sasquatch, right? And their source of income was the usual stuff that all the other gangs did, like extortion, assault, the normal things. The Tyger Claws were one of the larger gangs in Night City, and they had about 5,500 people in it, so they were almost as big as the Valentinos. Their style was pretty cool too, on par with the Valentinos in a way. Even though some of them kind of look like robots, some of them just look like modern samurais, they look really sick in my opinion. I mean, not sick as in sick, like I mean, they look cool. Anyway though, these guys have tattoos everywhere, they use katanas, they have cool cyberware, and they ride cool ass bikes. Now, believe it or not, this gang was actually a motorcycle club that was backed by Arasaka. Probably because they both were Japanese. By 2020, they became a small combat group which took over Japantown and protected the Japanese citizens of Night City. Arasaka kind of used them as a proxy gang, which basically meant that they would use them to do their dirty work or work that they didn't want people knowing about. And they were quite effective. You see that they would use these reflex enhancements to be more agile, and they had various weapons. They'd use guns, katanas. But anyway though, after the Night City Holocaust of 23, Arasaka basically abandoned them, but fortunately for them, there was this company called the Night City Co-Prosperity Sphere, or the NCCS, which formed a conglomerate of Japanese-based corps. Oh, conglomerate means this, by the way. I also didn't know. This is what later led to be known as the Watson development. Now, I don't know what they really developed in Watson. If you kind of go there, it's kind of a shithole, but anyway. The NCCS was led by Shinobu Nakagawa. And if this name is familiar to you, then it shouldn't, because he's barely mentioned in the game. But anyway, this guy was an actor, and he had similar motives to the Claws by protecting Japanese citizens in Night City. In 2042, Nakagawa just suspiciously died, and this caused a civil war within the Claws over his inheritance. See, he had two things going for him at the time, probably more, but this is just two. He had a thing called the Nakagawa Foundation, and he had the Tyger Claws. So this caused a lot of conflicts between the Claws as they started to kill each other because they all wanted a piece. But Nakagawa had a son named Ayato. Ayato obviously won the inheritance, and he gave the Nakagawa Foundation company to his wife, Ryoko Fujiwara, while he took the mantle of Shinobu II and became the leader of the Tyger Claws. You see, by 2045 though, Ayato kind of knew his empire was slipping, so he used to basically take these cybernetic enhancements to dull the pain, basically drugs, but in the future terms. At the same time though, Maelstrom wanted to expand into old Japantown, which caused conflicts between the Claws and them. The Tyger Claws also were fighting the Yakuza, specifically one family, the Kanzaki family, which is a very old and respected family in Night City. Now, this is where things kind of took a turn for the Claws. In 2067, the Claws assaulted a Joy Toy. A woman by the name of Elizabeth Borden, or Lizzie, killed 3 of the Claws. In retaliation, they also killed her. Now, this caused chaos for the Claws because there were riots for Lizzie all over Night City, which actually set a formation for the Mox Gang, which I'll get into now. Now, after bloodshed on both sides, they kind of reached an agreement and the Claws left the Mox alone, but they hated each other, obviously. That was about the only kind of major things that they got into. And by the 2070s and events of the game, the Claws were a huge group in Night City, occupying large amounts of Westbrook and Watson. They made a lot of money from bars, restaurants, and money laundering. You know, the works. Also, people who say the works just kind of want to say the works, like what I just did. But anyway, they were really dangerous, and because they were so large, they had many internal fights. But if an outsider intruded them, like V, they would usually unite and deal with them, then get back to killing each other. The youngest gang in Night City is the Mox, and they have about 200 to 250 members. Actually, thinking of it, I don't know how the Claws had such a big deal with them. There weren't that much of them. But anyway, they started in the year 2067 after the death of Leslie or Elizabeth Borden. That name should sound familiar to you if you played the game. Now, Leslie was a strip club owner and took care of her staff against violent customers, if you know what I mean. Essentially, the Claws assaulted a Joy Toy, if you get what I mean. I can't really say exactly what happened because YouTube doesn't like certain words. So yeah. Leslie's response was, well, to take an axe and kill 3 of the Claws, where she then put their bodies up for display outside of her club. I guess this was more of like a warning that if anyone hurt her workers, she'd kill them, and also to scare off the Claws. I mean, I kinda don't blame her, but anyways, this unfortunately didn't scare off the Claws, it just made them mad. What their response was to go to a club, racket, and unfortunately murder Leslie. The Claws probably didn't think much of it afterwards, but what followed afterwards was a series of riots throughout Night City. With many people that started to idolize Lizzie, she sort of became this symbol of defiance against brutality of gangs. Her followers then rebuilt her club and changed the name to Lizzie's Bar, which should be familiar to you. It's quite a prominent location in the start of the game. This was obviously done to honor her, and this was the formation of the Mox. The Mox was basically a gang that used to protect and bring those together who felt threatened and oppressed. It was more directed in that adult working space, but anyway. But to put it simply, they kind of just protected their workers from abuse. They also needed income, which came in the form of the brain dances. And by 2077, Susie Q was their leader. She became quite a negative lady. She didn't trust a lot of people, and she couldn't protect everyone in their field of work. So yeah, probably out of all the street gangs, the Mox may have been one of the better ones, in terms of their motives at least. Now, without a doubt, these guys were the worst out of everyone here. They were real pieces of shit. Kind of think of these guys like vultures. You know, they just kind of pick on the carcasses of the dead. I guess carcass is dead, but anyway, it's unknown how much members are in the Scavengers, but just know that these guys are scum. They essentially assault people unsuspectedly, even those on the street if they're not aware, and they usually harvest their implants and make money by selling these implants in the black market. It's unclear when exactly they formed, but it was sometime around after 2045. Again, these guys are probably the worst out of every gang because they simply didn't care about anything other than themselves or profit. The Scavs are shown to be of Russian descent and are known to be ruthless. They usually do stuff like kidnapping and even forcefully harvesting organs and implants as well for profit. They truly were the lowest of the low. The Wraiths are a group of rogue nomads that are mainly in the Badlands region of Cyberpunk, and they have anywhere between 300 to 1,200 members. Now, we don't actually know when this group formed, but they likely formed from being outcasts of other nomad groups. Which, I mean, nomads are outcasts, so these guys must have just been weird. But anyways, these guys typically travel at night, and they target people that are mainly asleep or unaware. The Aldecaldos and Wraiths have constant fights, but it's usually resolved. They typically get their money from attacking other nomads, stealing their loot, and similar to Scavengers, they also kidnap people and steal their chrome. But I don't think they as harsh as the Scavengers. I think their leader is a guy named Dog Killer, and well, if that's his greatest achievement, that doesn't really mean much, because in Night City there is no dogs. Dogtown's only gang, and they are quite impressive. It's unclear how much members they have, but they have total control over the Dogtown part of Pacifica. These guys basically kicked the police force out of Dogtown completely. and they have full control over the place. It started around 2017 by this dude named Kurt Hansen. Now Kurt was an NUSA military officer, and he was commanded to lead an operation called Midnight Storm, which was basically an assault to secure a beachhead in Pacifica. Basically, at this time of Cyberpunk, there was this thing called the Unification War, where the NUSA forced free states to follow federal laws, which obviously the free states didn't want to do because they were free, which obviously caused a lot of tension. Now you see, while NUSA was backed by Militech, the free states were backed by Arasaka, which also had a lot of rivalry because they were both mega corporations. Eventually though, the NUSA and the Free States made a peace treaty deal where Kurt was ordered to retreat, but he didn't. Instead, he turned his unit into Barghest, which is what we know it as today, which is named after some mythical dog. Hansen made Dogtown tax-free, and he kept the lowest of the low there. There was no law in Dogtown. Barghest basically became the law. Whatever they wanted was the law. Hansen also wanted total control over the area, so much so that he built these tall walls around the city to separate it from Night City, essentially making it a city within a city. However, we can kind of change the leadership of this gang depending on the choices V makes. And lastly is the Aldecaldos. Now they're probably my favorite group out of everyone in this video. To be honest, they're probably everyone's favorite because of one reason. As it events of the game, the Aldecaldos have about 500 to 600 members. They're actually the oldest gang in Night City, going all the way back to the 90s. So, long story short, in 1990 there was this guy by the name of Juan Aldecaldo. I think that's how you say Juan, so I'm gonna keep saying it that way. I don't know if it's right, but yeah. And he was a Mexican immigrant who came to the US. He was quite smart, he got a degree in engineering and all that, and he became a civil defense contractor, which kinda meant like his job was to provide special security and emergency services, basically to protect citizens. Anyway though, he had two kids, Maria and Ramon. Now, during this time in the universe of Cyberpunk, there was a lot of wars going on, which caused Juan to be retrenched. He was quite high in debt. He was ultimately forced to take low-paying jobs and even sell his house because of how high his debt was. This resulted in his family and him staying in the slums of Los Angeles. Now, unfortunately for Juan, this when his life started to take a turn. His daughter Maria died a day before her 17th birthday, which obviously took a toll on the family, especially her brother Ramon, who took it so hard that he actually dropped out of school. Eventually, Ramon started seeing this girl from a local gang by the name of Red Dogs. Again, I don't know who's naming these gangs, but I guess this makes more sense. They were obviously teenagers. Eventually, though, Ramon joined up with this gang with the influence of the girl he was dating, and he was brutally shot to death on his 19th birthday. The media kind of covered it by saying it was some robbery gone wrong, but when they interviewed Juan, he actually critiqued the government and the cops about not doing anything about gang violence. This speech was so inspirational that over 7,000 people showed up to Ramon's funeral, with mutual grief as their lives were also affected by gang violence. Well, you see, after the funeral, Juan was kind of gutted, losing his will to love, but the pastor of the funeral, Father Jonah Dominguez, spoke with him and convinced him that they have to do something about this gang violence. So eventually Juan agreed, and they made a group of small volunteers to act as protectors for small communities, which was actually a massive success. Whenever gangs did interfere, their group always kind of countered them. This led more and more people to join, which ultimately created the Aldecaldos. In the early 2000s, the government didn't really like the Aldecaldos because they showed them how useless they were. And after seeing nothing was going to change, the Aldecaldos and a mix of about 5,000 people left LA because of how shitty LA was at this time. It was kind of in ruins. So after that, the Aldecaldos group kind of just worked as farmers and simply made do with what they had. But during this time, there was a city called Pittsburgh, which was destroyed due to a nuclear meltdown. But it had a lot of valuable resources in it. No one really wanted to get those resources, but the government offered the job to the Aldecaldos, which they ultimately took. and this was kind of good for them because they made some money from it. They also got a contract to rebuild LA, which they later lost to a group called the Jodes. Now, the Jodes were like a rogue nomad group, which them and the Aldecaldos have fights with, but anyways. Now, in 2002, Father Dominguez died of a heart attack, and in fact, Juan also almost died of a heart attack, and he was getting old. So he decided that with little time left, they're gonna go back to Mexico, and he's going to guide the Aldecaldos to recreate Mexico City, as well as make a success out of the gang. During this time, Juan unfortunately died, but he left the group to a nomad named Santiago. Now, he took the name of Santiago Aldecaldo to honor Juan, and you actually meet this guy in a sequence with Johnny when he's in the past. Speaking of Johnny Silverhand was also smuggled out of the US by the Aldecaldos, and he stayed with them for some time. Around 2015, the Aldecaldos returned to the US, and by the 2040s, the Aldecaldos helped survivors of the Night City Holocaust, which you can tell how bad it was if they still were affected after all those years. I mean, it was nearly 20 years later. But anyways, the Aldecaldos and a company called Stormtech made temporary shelters to help the survivors of the Holocaust. In 2041, the Aldecaldos made a camp at the base of Coronado, which became their permanent camp. There was also a lot of confrontations they had with the Jodes, but it was ultimately resolved by 2045. Now you see the Aldecaldos' power was starting to drop due to Servicio Valentino, and in the 2070s the Aldecaldos used caravans to transport people and goods in between Chicago, Phoenix, and Night City. Oh, also, the next Cyberpunk game is in Chicago, so we should probably see the Aldecaldos in that game. So that's always good news. And as the events of the game, the Aldecaldos was led by a guy named Saul Bright, who led the Aldecaldos to the Badlands to find new work. This gang is probably the noblest out of them all, and probably the most likable. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, and if you made it this far, thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. This is my first video on here, by the way, so yeah, there's that. And I'm gonna make others of other games and stuff, so see you in those. Bye.